Brian, are you ready?
I am. It's 3 o'clock. So, yeah, I think if we're ready to call this second of 3 budget meetings to order, let's go ahead and call the roll, Judy.
All right, Hausch.
I'm here.
McQueen is here, but muted at present. Stokes. Not yet here. Krieger.
I'm here.
Thank you. Curlis. Okay, Laura is going to try to phone in. She's having some difficulty getting to a computer. Also present is Village Manager Josue Salmarone, Solicitor Brianne Parcels, Finance Director Matt Dillon, and Public Works Director Johnny Burns.
All right, thanks, Judy. So, Josue, I don't know if you're kicking this off or if Matt is.
Yes, I can, Brian. Matt's going to lead the first part of the discussion, and I'll start with some of the higher level things, the action items that we walked away from the last meeting, and just to highlight some of the changes that you're going to see in this meeting, and you would have seen them in your first package, and that is that. At the last meeting, we were looking at a budget deficit, a significant budget deficit, and we've been able to close a significant portion of that gap by reviewing more of our actual data on income tax revenues, adjusting our conservative risk profile, so we're being a little less conservative with our projections, which were highlighted in Matt's memo. And so that resulted in an significant increase in our revenues. Then we took the tasks, the request, such as estimating the shift of healthcare expenses of 5% over to the employees, researching cost-saving opportunities in the health insurance coverage, going from employee-sponsored program to an individual plans. We took that step a bit further. We engaged another broker in this space, and I don't want to signal that just in case our broker is watching that we're making a decision about changing brokers, but we reached out to a firm that is a national in scope, and they have access to different pool markets than what the pool market that we're in and what our current broker, the markets that our current broker participates in. So we're doing our due diligence. So we've expanded that task to not just look at those two types of plan, but looking at different pools. And the different pools there are two particular pools that are municipal insured. So there's two that we looked into. One is OML, has a municipalities pools insurance, and there's another that's by school districts and municipalities. Difference in those two is one exclusively works with one insurance provider or one healthcare provider, and the OML works with several. So we're expanding. We expanded on that task, and we've also took a deeper dive into the public safety budget. I've got some updates on that. There was a concern that we have added to the police department staffing. We looked at the numbers going back to 2016, 2017, when the community outreach position was created by council, and we fulfilled it. And so at that time, we actually eliminated or did not backfill one police officer position. So we were able to reduce from 9 officers to 8, to the 8 that we have now. So we made that change several years ago. So those are the highlights. What is new for this meeting? We would like to present some revenue opportunity ideas. I don't think any of these are new, but it's worth revisiting, and that is the topic of reciprocal tax credit, adjusting the credit factor. We've got other revenue opportunities, such as making adjustment to our planning and zoning fees, considering street levy to fund street improvements, parks levy to fund pool and park improvements, the implementation of store management fee. Store management expenses are significant in our operations, and they're covered by the general fund. So a good example of those expenses are the Dayton Street stormwater rerouting project that we have. That's about $83,000 in expenses just this year, plus the other catch basins and other things that repair. So we could do a deeper dive in all of those opportunities or any particular ones. So that's the summary. Matt, did I miss anything in the summary, or do you want to take over with your presentation?
I'd like to take over and just summarize the changes and put some numbers to what's happened since our last meeting. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see this first slide here? Okay. All righty. So since our last meeting, I just want to cover this comparison to our overall impacts to the reserve based on the revenue changes. Going into the last meeting, we were projecting an unencumbered beginning balance for January 22 of 1.5 million. We were able to, as Josue alluded to, was able to go in and actually update all our actuals through the month of September in income tax and code those all into our accounting system so we can get those updated. So I now have a current projection for a beginning balance of next year, January 2022, of 1.9 million. That is a projection of just above a $400,000 increase to begin the year. The budgeted estimated revenue in 22 is also up based on those, mostly the income tax coming in much higher than the previous year. As I said in the memo, I hope everyone had a chance to read the memo, that we have surpassed in just 9 months our total from 2020 in income tax. So 9 months in 2021, we're already past our total in income tax for the year 2020. The expense budget, $4,452,820, has remained unchanged. We will dive into a little bit of the detail on the expenses. And then the estimated balance at year end is expected to be 1.7 million. This is a significant change to our projected reserve. We changed from having a reserve of about 94 days with last Monday's estimate to now having a projected reserve of about 155 days or 42.5% of an annual budget. So we just under a half of a year of expenses there for the reserve. We now have a current deficit in the budget of $175,541. This is the difference between estimated revenue for 2022 and estimated expenses. So this is this new deficit projection is a decrease of about $281,000 since our last meeting. And this is the new projections for the revenue, how the pie would divide out here. The new revenue for FY22 is now projected at $3,877,279. The FY22 recommended budget has remained unchanged. I did submit the Excel file, which includes all the detail, every object code in the FY22 proposed budget. This includes, like as I mentioned before, $1,357,000 worth of transfers, much of which is to support our parks and street systems. The FY22 recommended budget by category, I'm showing the pie here, and I just want to show you how this divides up between personnel, travel and training, contract services, and materials and supplies. This is also unchanged from our prior meeting. This slide I want to spend a little bit of time on. This is our prior year budget comparisons. Where are we now versus where we have been the past couple of years? The proposed FY22 recommended budget is, as I said, $4,052,000. This is actually the lowest budget since 2019. And in 2019, we had a budget of $3,996,000. In 2020 and 2021, they were slightly higher than our current proposed budget here. And on the far right column, I've included reductions to category between FY22 and the current budget year. So here are our cuts. I wanted to spend a little bit more time discussing those cuts and let you know that we have these cuts in this past meeting. They're the same ones, but I want you to know that we did spend a lot of time working with the departments. I looked at prior year actuals, not the budgets, but what we've actually spent. And I tried to carve out as much money as I could while also meeting our obligations for personnel increases. So you'll see a total reduction from last year, from our current year budget of $270,000. This is offset slightly by a $64,000 increase to personnel just related to our obligations. Other cuts by category are also seen on the far right column. Proposed reductions from 2021. I want to give you a good idea of what we have cut by line item, by department. And what we have here is a list of every reduction in 2022 compared to 2021 that's over $1,000. And so there is quite a reduction to transfers from the general fund, mainly due to our not having to do the grant match for the Safe Routes to School. There's a reduction to capital equipment and public safety. I don't want to go through all these, but I do want to provide the list to you to let you know that we've done what I feel is a pretty deep dive on trying to carve out costs for the upcoming budget year. Proposed increases from 2021 over $1,000 are also included. These are mostly personnel driven and just includes by amount and from largest amount to smallest amount, the increases that you'll see in 2022 versus 2021 as proposed. Many of these are personnel driven to meet our obligations with as far as longevity, merit increases, COLAs, things that have been sort of baked into bringing our people on and keeping them up with inflationary increases and just meeting our obligations with personnel. So in total, we've had total reductions to non-personnel in 2022. Was able to carve out $334,000 compared to last year. Total increases, this is just to personnel, were $64,000. Those speak to the obligations that we discussed to meet various promotional increases. And for an overall total decrease from our current budget year into the proposed 2022 of $270,000 in the general fund. So we were able to overall take a cut of $270,000 from last year, while also meeting our personnel increases and continuing our level of services that we all enjoy as of today. The general fund budget impact to the reserve, I also want to put a little bit of focus on this. We've ended 2019 and 2020 around $2.4 million. Our current year estimated ending balance for this current budget year is $1.9 million. And the projected estimate for next year is $1,724,000. Again, the $1,724,000 represents about a 42% of an annual budget for the reserve. It's about 150 days. Quite an increase since our last meeting, and it's quite above our 90-day reserve limit that we've discussed in previous meetings. That is the majority of the budget summary. I'm going to open it up. I want to spend a lot of our time just fleshing some of this out, discussing any questions that you might have, really get down to the work that we might need to do. And I'm going to open it up now. I just wanted to make sure that we covered all the changes and we're aware of what the new changes are in the current budget. Are there any questions or any slides you'd like me to go back to at this time that you'd like to focus on?
Hi, Matt. It's Mary Ann.
Hi, Mary Ann.
Well, certainly it's wonderful to hear of the projected increase in revenue, and I'm sure I speak for everyone at the job you guys have done of decreasing expenses. So I really appreciate that. So my question is, how much of the decrease in expenses is kicking the can down the road, so to speak? In other words, if we're not going to do something in 2022, then is it something that's going to have to be done in 23 or 4 or whatever?
Well, I don't think that the majority of the cuts I would characterize as kicking the can down the road. I think that there are opportunities for infrastructure improvements through the transfers in the general fund that go to streets and parks that you might see. But I've done and worked with Johnny Burns and everyone here at the team to make sure that we are continuing our level of service while also being very responsible to our infrastructure, to our land, our capital, our equipment, all those things. So what I have here on the screen is the reductions. The second from the top includes a reduction to capital equipment. If you remember last year, the police bought a vehicle, a police vehicle, and we are not including that this year. The rest, I think I want to feel safe by saying I've looked at actuals and I've just carved out what we're not spending and what we don't need. I've tried to do my best job with that without cutting any level of service. This is a truer reflection of our actual costs without a lot of real, inflation or, room for error. So if this budget is the one that we decide to approve and vote on, there may be, times next year where we go to the supplemental and we find just a couple needs here that just, we tried to budget so close to actual cost that we may need just a couple supplements next year, but I'm not predicting that those are coming. I think I've done a good job of looking at our prior year expenses and just carving out what we actually spend while maintaining our current level of service. So Mary Ann, just to reiterate your question, I wouldn't characterize these cuts as a kick of the can down the road. These are just, it's trying to carve out any, I guess fat isn't the best word, but we're trying to be leaner and we're trying to match our actual costs and actual charges. And so that when things come up as needs in the budget next year, we have a truer sense of how much we spend versus what we might have available in case an unforeseen need does arise.
Matt, this is Kevin. Hey,
Kevin.
thanks for what you've done, and I, like Mary Ann, I'm glad we found some money somewhere. However that happened. A similar question to Mary Ann's is, and I think you touched on it, is because you used the phrase a little while ago, was trimming the fat. So my question was, are we pulling back? My first question is, are we pulling back on something we ought to be doing, but are just deciding not to in terms of some level of service? And secondarily, I'd like to talk about the overtime costs, just when you have an opportunity to get there. What's budgeted for overtime?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kevin, I wouldn't consider this anyway a detriment to our continual level of service. I think what we miss out here is the ability to pay for things in the budget that may come up professional service wise if we need a specific contract for something that we're not seeing right now. These are austerity measures, and we're going to have to, as a team, operate just a little bit differently. But we're not talking about getting less done next year. This is just the way we spend money. I think the training budget is getting cut here. I would consider that an investment in our current employees, but we're in a position where we got to look and we've got to get leaner. So these are the actions that we propose and that we've taken so far. I do not see that you will see an impact in service changes through what we're proposing. We're trying to continue business as usual and get as much done as we can while taking care of our personnel obligations.
Well, I mean, that what you just said, the austerity budget, I mean, that certainly reiterates, if you will, my question regarding overtime. And, you know, when I hear austerity, I think about moratoriums on overtime, hiring freezes, and things of that nature. And so we haven't really discussed hiring necessarily, but again, there is money set aside for overtime, and I just want to talk about, you know, how necessary that is. Is that a true expectation of what we intend to do, or can we manage things differently such that we don't have to depend on overtime pay?
Josue, do you want to take the
Yes,
comment?
I'll jump in, Mike. Thank you. Kevin, it's an excellent question. And from the service side, we've been looking at adjusting our schedule so that we have limit the impact of overtime expense. So for example, when we did a deeper dive of our public safety budget, we looked at the level of service that we have throughout the week, and we share those schedules with you. So from those schedules, you will see that during a 24-hour operation, you know, our public safety is 24/7, 2/3 of the day, we have 2 officers on. So that's about 16 hours of coverage. So we look at what adjustments could we make at the schedule without significant impacts to service delivery, that we could reduce the potential for overtime. And so we're not talking about necessarily cutting shift, and definitely not cutting personnel, but looking at if there is a shift that is going on schedule, could we leave it unscheduled, particularly if it's at a slow time, so that we don't have to pay another public safety officer overtime to cover that shift. Now, there's a few things that will need to be determined. What is the likelihood of service calls during that period of time? And we're going to be mapping all of our service calls and service calls by category so that we could use some predictive analytics to estimate when is our highest service demand. Now, we all know that there are some things that you can't predict. You can't predict domestic violence calls. You can't predict a lot of the types of calls that we are required to provide 2 officers on. So we have about 20 service types or calls that we are required to send out to individuals. So domestic violence, it's one of them, a crash with injury, a call with a weapon or an assault. These types of call require 2 officers are on. So what is our risk if during that 16-hour shift that we have 2 people on at all times, if we cut any hours to that, we would have to make sure that it's clear with the Greene County Sheriffs that they will be serving backup for us for our calls, or they would, if we are already on a call, that they will be serving, responding to a secondary call that may come while our 1 officer on duty is responding to a call. So that's a way that we could better manage the impact of overtime in the public safety line item without having what we expect limiting the impact on service delivery. Does that satisfy your question?
Yes, it does. Because it sounds like you do have a plan. And I'm just wondering, however, you know, when we do have the overtime, you know, is that sometimes the result of a plan, or is it an urgent situation?
Oftentimes it has to do with an emergency, or we have a shift scheduled. And say you have somebody scheduled for a shift, they get sick or they call out, whatever happens, we typically try to reschedule or schedule someone for that shift so that we can ensure coverage during those hours. So, but there are times when you have an emergency, or you an officer is dealing with a call and they're required to stay on the scene until until the situation is resolved. There are times when we call officers in. If there's an issue that requires more officers to be on site, we'll call them in. Then we have special events. Special events, we'll call in additional staff to provide support, and that comes at an extra expense, at an overtime expense.
Okay, good, thanks. I think I'm satisfied. And I trust that you all are handling it. You know, it's not overly expensive. You know, and I don't think you're being wasteful. Just wanted to, you know, consider something that again tends to take a hit during times of austerity.
Mhm.
Thank you.
This is Lisa. And I don't expect to see this right now, but I would be interested in an analysis of either cuts or reallocations of budget for public safety versus infrastructure and other elements of public works. I want to see that we have a very sharp pencil on public safety, and that we give the infrastructure and all aspects of public works the budget that is needed to keep that at its highest quality possible, and that we're not being distracted by shiny things or nice to have things at the expense of the basic aspects of keeping the village from crumbling. I really would like to see that.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sure.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or any slides you guys want me to focus on or look at this time? So again, we still have a gap of $175,000 in the deficit. This doesn't have a true risk of impacting our reserve, but it does dip it in from 1.9 million to begin the year to approximately 1.7. And we have some ideas for revenue. And I don't know if Josue, you want to talk in more detail those revenue projections?
Sure, we can. Is there anything that the council have any questions on some of the tasks we already covered, shifting 5% of the healthcare expenses? Are you satisfied with what you've seen? Do you need anything more? Do you have questions on that item?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was just gonna say, no, I didn't. I know when Matt was going through the one slide with all the cuts, he, you know, advised he didn't want to go through all of them. And I don't want to hear every jot and tittle necessarily, but just those things that really got a big amount of movement, those things that really made a difference. As long as we can, you know, and I don't know what's, I can't characterize big or little, you know, but the things that where the most ground was gained with increasing revenues and decreasing expenses. Just want to make sure that we you know, have an idea of what those are, just anecdotally. And like I said, every little dime and nickel necessary, I don't need to hear about, but where there were big changes, one way or the other. Just want to make sure we have some idea of what happened in each of those.
Well, Kevin, the projection for income tax was rather steady this year. We took in approximately 1.5 million last year. Through 9 months, we've already taken in 1.5. So we had a conservative estimate going into that things were going to, I wasn't predicting a huge amount of growth in income tax. But when I sat and, you know, I was able to put in all the actuals for the income tax received, we've done quite well. So it's a great thing, for the workers in our community we've had an increase to income tax. Property taxes have also done well this year. And those have really been much of the story. As if you look at the screen here, our budget has remained relatively flat while also taking into account personnel increases that were needed. So I like to think that we've gone through and really looked at actuals and tried to fit the budget based on actuals. And we're just doing our best to see what we've spent in prior years and only budget what we've spent. So we're going to do our best. It's our, I think it's our best approach at this time. And going through some of these cuts, you look at, a lot of them came to professional services and contracts. This eliminates a lot of our room for additional support for certain things, but that would be related to, I would like to say, support I might get with the accounting software, but I took these reductions based on what we've been spending. And so I did my best to carve out and just base this on actuals. I think if you look here, no one was really held harmless. I think I did my best job to look at everything and look at what we've been spending and just and not put a bunch of increases in without a necessity to do so. So are there non-personnel items that have remained steady or constant or went up? Sure. But I also found opportunities to cut where there were some.
And I know with respect to trends and projections for the last 2 months of the year, I mean, you have to stick with the trends that you've experienced in the previous 10 months. But on that note, is there an opportunity for some more good news that we just haven't seen yet?
Yes, there is. But, we estimate on the conservative side. So there'll be things like the Cresco, not all the Cresco jobs that are in the badging process. Those individuals are not working yet. So there's income tax there that we're not collecting because those folks aren't working, but we expect that they will be employed. There'll be new construction workers in the village doing several projects. Comedy Club was approved, the radio station and the Ober development. The workers that would be building those products, we are able to collect income tax from, and those will be one-time revenue sources. But those are things that we anticipate that will help in the future, but we can't factor those revenues in. Yeah, just from a best practices perspective, there we have a high confidence that they will happen, but they're not hitting our books yet. So or anytime soon, and soon meaning they probably won't hit our books within the next 4 to 6 months. So those are things that we can't count on, but we know that they would improve our position next year.
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Did I miss anything there, Matt?
No, I don't think so. I mean, also, Kevin, we're going to look at expenses through the next, I guess, the remainder of the year, 2 months. And we're going to make decisions based on purchase requests. And I would like to return some, from our appropriated budget back to our reserve and our bottom line. So while our current projections include a total, they estimate that the total budget will be spent, I expect that we will have some savings to the general fund by year end that will actually increase that bottom line further from what you see here. And so, but I don't want, in my position, I do not want to count the money till I get it. So we're gonna wait, and we're gonna see what our savings was from this year's budget, and it only helps our position further. So
I will add to that, Kevin and Matt. Over the last 2 years, you've seen that while we get a budget, we don't spend all the entire amount that we're budgeted for. And we try to incentivize a culture of spending we encourage folks to spend what they need. And there's enough room in there to cover all the planned things. And if there's a savings that they can generate, we work with the teams to encourage that. We are moving away from a culture where if it's in the budget, they got to spend it, because if they don't, they're going to lose it. So we don't want to incentivize that kind of behavior, because I think you all know that in many government organizations, when that is incentivized, folks will spend every penny in their budget and not look for saving opportunities. We're building a culture where folks are getting creative and looking for saving opportunities.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Hi, Matt. First of all, I appreciate the time that you took to meet with me this week. And while we were meeting, you mentioned a budgeting software that you felt would be, well, I guess both better for you, clearly, especially in terms of projections, but also my sense was that it might be more helpful for council and the rest of staff in understanding the budget. Have you included some kind of software like that in this budget?
No, it's not currently included in the budget. And I'll speak to that a little bit. What you have and have been sent in Excel, was built from scratch. It's an Excel document. We have an all funds budget of over $14 million. And I think it makes us a little vulnerable not to have a budgeting software to where when we want to make or need to make on the fly decisions, that I'm giving you the best up to date information. So it takes a lot of work to catch up numbers to get them up to date at any point. That's why we have various quarterly reports a month or so after the quarter has ended. We've got to key in deposits. We've got a lot of work to do to catch up to that. And so the budgeting software was just a mention of mine, in that I think it would increase our ability to do informed decision making. We would be a little bit more intelligent and up to date with where numbers currently are, without having to do as many estimates. It would also do a lot for our visualization and any questions that we have to do deeper dives into the budget. Right now, what you've been sent is a big spreadsheet, and it's got a lot of pivot tables in it. And it was just a suggestion that I think at a certain point when we're ready, I think it would help us as a village. I think we would get towards steps closer towards having a budget document that we could print annually. A budget document, I think that was part of sort of a long-term goal that we're working on, and getting in line with the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, to work towards a distinguished budget award. So basically an accreditation for our budget product that we put together. Right now, I've just got Excel, and there's small businesses that have budgeting software that's a little bit beyond what we're using. So it was just a mention in passing to you that when the time's appropriate, we might want to look into it, and I think it would help us as far as the documentation on where our budget is, how many FTEs that we have on board at a certain time, certain point in time. We can take budget snapshots, on certain days, but right now it takes a lot of effort to catch things up and to put things into a spreadsheet. And I think it's somewhat a vulnerable system. So that's.
Well, I would like to suggest that I guess I'm going to strongly suggest that we consider having you investigate what that cost might be and put that in the budget for 2022. It seems like we're really upgrading utility software. We have the broadband thing, and not being able to get as much out of our budgeting process as we could, I think is not something we want. So I don't know if the rest of the council would agree, but I think it makes sense to at least understand what that cost would be, especially given the benefits, and put it in for 2022.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that. So, Matt, the kind of software you're thinking about would also enhance accessibility for citizens, I presume?
Yes, I think it would increase transparency. I think it would also increase our informed decision making. The software that I'm speaking of, we've met with, we have a product called VIP from a company called Software Solutions that's local to the Miami Valley. But this would be seamlessly integrated with our accounting software, and we would be just in a better position to do on-the-spot reporting. I think documentation-wise, I think you guys would get better documents so we could do our homework a little bit better going into these type of council work sessions. I think anytime that you guys could even have access at time to view where the budget is and how expenses are. I think there's moments where you have to wait to get those updated, and I think it increases accessibility, transparency, and in my mind could lead to better or more informed decision making on all of our parts.
Great. Yeah, I attended a webinar about a month ago, and I was pretty impressed. It was under the title of budget books, and I would like that to be in the mix of following up on potential solutions in this area, because I was pretty impressed with the platform that they had. So, but I don't know anything about the cost.
Yeah, this is Lisa. I've had conversations with Josue and with Matt and with council about being interested in a participatory budget process that I think would probably have to start in like April for the next year, given the educational learning curve. And I wonder if that sort of software would better support that kind of process as well. And or do you see any other tools or hidden costs from moving into at least a small participatory budget exercise?
No, so you mind if I answer that? Okay. No, I don't. The software would better visualize and break into, I think, an understandable format for citizen participation. Those could be, something we look at, like you say, next year. We start planning out with our budget calendar a full year of participatory type meetings. So when we go to do the FY22 budget calendar, I'll make sure to load up when the quarterly reports are coming. If have a projection for the supplementals, as well as just start putting calendar dates for having open meetings, if this is something we're all interested in, to meet with citizens and in at least a elementary way start evaluating trade-offs that we all face as local government professionals when translating community priorities into financial metrics. So I think part of what we could gain from some of those meetings is really fleshing out how difficult these trade-offs are that we have in the community. We all have a separate sense of values, what we think the community needs and wants, and I think translating those into dollars and cents with the community could only help to gain a better sense of what our community values here and what we want out of the budget.
I think Lisa, yes, there's various ways to approach a participatory budget, and there's costs and there's also opportunities with engaging citizens on projects, because there's times that we're working to check off everything that we can, right? We don't want to leave an area neglected, and so we try to touch a little bit of everything. A good example of that approach is we did the bike path lane on South College. Well, we only had money to do half of it last year, so we only did half of it, and we pushed the other funds to next year. And so engaging the community, well, we took approach where we want to get a little bit of everything done, but with a participatory budget, we can make those trade-offs where the community could highly value completing the entire path and not dealing with the pond issue or dealing with another project that we're also trying to take care of. So there are opportunities such as that through a participatory budget, we could create value or associate our costs with particular values that the community wants. So there's that piece about the participatory budget. What Matt is talking about with this software, a budgeting software, our VIP software is an accounting software. It's not a planning software. It's not a alignment of key performance indicators with financial resources. There are many elements of those planning processes, goal setting and budget planning processes that are what our software cannot accommodate because our software is an accounting software. What our software lacks is the ability to visualize content. You're really putting out numbers from the system, and in order to get meaning out of those numbers, you have to categorize it, you have to make comparison, and all the charts are made by hand. And so Matt and I will continue to explore the software options to have a module or a complementary software to what we already have that would allow us to do two things. One, better visualize data, and two, the idea of creating scenarios. Right now, if we want to look at something different in our budget, we have to essentially hard keyed the numbers to be able to get at an estimated total and be able to visualize the financial impact of that change. A software that can do scenario planning, we could just enter the inputs or determine the variables to adjust, and we can put in a formula or give it case scenarios, and the software could recalculate the entire spreadsheet and put out a visualization of those changes without us having to hard key all the numbers to look at one scenario. So, for example, included in your packet is the scenarios, a scenario where we would do an 11.5% cut across the board, right? We did we manually coded those numbers and calculated numbers. In the room, the managers, we estimated what that impact will be. Well, if you had to cut 11.2% out of capital, what does that look like? An example of what that looked like, what we have planned, and there are, I think, 8 or 9 windows, energy efficient windows for the John Bryan Center. So we have to manually calculate that. If we had a software that would do the scenario planning, they could reduce the service items by a proportional amount, and we could drill down onto the cost at a specific budget line item without having to hard key it in. Now, for certainly when it would be responsive, I love spreadsheets. I can track those little numbers and multiple numbers at once, but I'm only effective with my ability or our ability to deliver the message, deliver the content. And so we think that that's important. We think that having that ability to visualize is important. I think Matt's very simple graphics of showing revenue and how revenue compares to the budget, and in a color chart show whether we're over or under, says a lot. It says a lot. It says a lot more than what looking at the financial figure side.
Well, Kevin here, just real quick, I'll just add my voice to the count, if you will, in terms of, be interested in further investigating what would be a good fit and get the benefits that we're talking about. in terms of the accounting and budgeting software.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Kevin.
Sure, and that's something we can work up to get some details on. We don't have a cost estimate at this time. It just was a comment in passing that I think over the course of the upcoming fiscal year, we could discuss and maybe bring to council for something to be added as a supplemental. I don't want to put a dollar item to it at this time. I think it's just something in passing that could improve our work session processes and our ability for informed decision making at the council and in the administrative level.
And now that we're on the topic of software, we also are having another software conversation. That is that we currently have two accounting softwares for different elements of our work. We have one for all of our utility billing. So our utility billing is on authority billing, and then our organizational accounting is and the VIP. So we're also exploring options of going back to having a single solution for all of our accounting needs. And so we're exploring that, and there may be something to bring back to you guys around that. Okay, any other questions on this topic? Okay, so we discussed the health benefits. Those impact are shifting that 5%, the impact on the general fund, it's a total of 10%. I think that 10%, that 10,000, while that 10,000 is a significant number, I think the collateral damage is greater than that $10,000. So I have to just put that out there. I don't know if that's something our council wants to discuss further. What do you need from us to consider that that financial figure?
So this is Kevin real quick. I did join just a couple of minutes late, and you were in the middle of that conversation about health insurance costs. And if you responded to my question via email, I might have missed it. But I think it's the Stark County deal. Did you find anything good with that?
Yes, Kevin. We looked into that program. We also looked into the OML, and we had a meeting with a broker that looks at the different pools. So the link that you sent me, and I did respond that we would look into it, is a group of school districts and municipal governments that together they make their own pool, and they work exclusively with Anthem as the plan administrator. So they're buying an Anthem package, and together they made that risk pool. So that is an option that would be available to us. We also look at the Ohio Municipal League Health Insurance Plan, and how they approach that plan is that they work with several providers, and the pool participants have options to select which plan would fit their needs. So there's a plan administrator that administers several different plans. We've met with a broker, an agency. It's Marsh and McLennan agency, and we talked through several options that are available to us. One is the current broker structure that we're in now, where a broker puts together our packet as a market participant, and they send it out to the general marketplace, where multiple insurance providers, whether it's Anthem, Aetna, United Medical, all the players have an opportunity to bid for a business, or we could go the route of one of those two other providers, such as the link that you sent me, Kevin, or AML, and join that pool and buy a plan within that pool. So we're exploring all those options. We looked into I did my research, and with Matt, we've held several conversations on any cost benefits of looking at an individual plan on the healthcare exchange versus the employer sponsor program. So as from a regulatory framework, because we are 50 employees or under, we're at 49 employees, we are able to participate in the healthcare exchange. And there are several ways that we as an employer could participate in that. One is through the Marsh and McLennan. One of the services they offer is that they work with their clients to set up employer-sponsored programs within that network, and essentially you're giving the employee the money to buy their health plan. There are some difficulties at getting at exact financial impact overall, because there will be some employees that would see savings because of their need for medical services or the type of plan that they would pick. I think what Laura had proposed was what would a gold or platinum plan will look like. And while gold and platinum, there are several different plan options within gold plans. So for example, one of the scenarios we looked at with the Marsh and McLennan folks were that gold plans, there are gold plans that are PPO, and there are plans that are HSA PPO plans, or HSA HMO plans. So there's a lot of variety even within the gold and the platinum plans. And so to know the exact financial cost, we would have to have some of that financial information. So, but overall, we also looked at medical mutual information that they have published on the employer sponsored program versus the individual marketplace. Some states that have very strong healthcare exchange programs, the market is showing a cost reduction on those individual health plans in states where the healthcare exchange is strong. Ohio is not a state with a strong individual healthcare marketplace. What is considered a strong marketplace is one where there's a lot of participants, both as customers, so individuals buying their health plan, and so that creates a very diverse risk pool. The more people in the risk pool, the greater the spreading of the risk. And part of the strong plan also means a lot of plan participants in the plan. And the state, Ohio, hasn't seen that rebound of some of the market players that have pulled out from it. Obviously, you'll have the three big players, which are Anthem, which is our current provider, United Medical, and Aetna. So there's a lot more work that we will need to do to be able to get at the financial impact of that. For the time being, I think we had the conversation that we left off with March was that we would provide some general information about our services and our plan details, and they will evaluate what's available in the market. And evaluate in the market is from a perspective of submitting a tailored proposal to the village on what cost savings a switch from a broker would, a change of broker would provide to us. And as being the fiduciary agents that we are, we have to explore and consider proposals that would deliver the same service with greater value or lower cost. So we will evaluate and consider any proposal they submit to us.
Yeah, and I'm just high on that. I just don't know that it's how good it is in the absolute, but as a member of the Greene County Public Library Board, I mean, they were faced with a 50% increase from United Healthcare, from one year to the next. So it didn't take much to be better than what United Healthcare was proposing, but even through the deliberations, there was a lot of flexibility, and it really just seemed ideal, at least, for Greene County Public Library. So like I said, it may not be that great, but I just witnessed a great example of that plan being applied here locally.
Right. And to put that in perspective, what is it we're talking about? We're talking about the Stark County Schools Council, which is a consortium of 164 school districts, libraries, and colleges and municipal agencies. And the Ohio Municipal League, it's the Ohio Municipal League.
Great. Well, I'll trust that you all will do the right thing. Like I said, I just wanted to make sure that got some eyes on it because it seemed like a great thing, at least from the library's perspective, because they were starting in a bad place with that 50% increase from United Healthcare.
Right. And I think, the plan, we looked into the structure of our current plan, and we're in a fully insured plan, which the insurance is, we're not a self-funded plan where we're setting money aside to cover certain expenditures and whatnot. This is a fully insured plan. So we looked at the structure, and the plan that we're on is expected to yield one of the most stability in price increase, which has made for very manageable increases for us over the years. Last year we were able to continue our plan with very little increase, and we were able to add additional services. So we added the vision plan services to our portfolio or our offerings to staff, and many of them took advantage of the opportunity, and there was a reasonable price. So the structure of the plan matters, and we'll also be looking at, as part of our continued work on this, we'll look at any cost savings opportunities of considering a plan that is different from the fully insured plan. Is that satisfactory for council on our work with the health insurance to date?
I'm satisfied.
Okay, are we, I'm reviewing my list here. We did the deeper dive into the public safety in terms of getting you the spreadsheets. We talked about our coverage, that we are running a 24/7 hour operation, of which 16 hours, which are 2/3 of the coverage, is being provided by 2 officers at one time. So we mentioned a strategy on how we would mitigate or limit the impact of the overtime. So we're in conversations with Chief, and we'll speak with we'll continue this conversation with Chief and the new Chief and the sergeant and the management team on how we could limit the overtime expense and still deliver the service that we're expected to deliver. So that'll be an ongoing conversation. On the office. Yes.
I'm sorry. When you look at your scenarios, can you also look at for the police, could you also look at a scenario where if you have an officer resign, you consider repurposing that position to be some other kind of position, like an additional social work, mental health professional, something like that, rather than automatically just hiring another police officer, and what the implications of that would be, knowing that a person with that mental health background could potentially go to certain types of calls.
Mm-hmm. The short
I really haven't seen any, I mean, and this is not a criticism of any individual, but in my tenure, other than hiring Florence, I really haven't seen any attempts at kind of innovations with staffing that both try to find a different mix of people to truly be peace officers and also control budget.
Mm-hmm. It's an excellent question, Lisa. There are a couple of things that I have looked at and I have discussed with the team. There's some that I've been caught or limited in speaking about them. But I can tell you some of the things that we looked into. So a couple months ago, we were piloting better services through our phone or dispatch services. So we were intentional about hiring somebody who had that mental health work and could provide support for the team in Florence during after hours. So having a dispatcher that had skills in crisis intervention and crisis management were important. So we were intentional about hiring someone with that skill set, and we were particularly trying to address this challenge of when Florence not here, who do you send the cases that are involving crisis and need additional follow-up? Well, the dispatcher would help play that role in doing the intake and making an assessment of what's needed. So we tried that. We unfortunately we lost the employee to a competing agency. An agency was able to provide a full-time job and better pay. So we consider that as you're talking about thinking something outside the box or something more innovative. I've and what I'm about to say, I know that the police officers listen to these public meetings, the chief listened to this public meeting, and so I don't want to create any unnecessary controversy. But there are things that we have to talk about as small organizations that provide a very robust service. So I've looked at this model of where municipalities that running 24/7 operations and are local and their community characteristics they require more of what we require. So what are they doing? What are some of these smaller progressive communities doing? Some have merged their police department, fire departments, and EMS service. And I've been reading on some of the outcomes of having such a robust skill set of team of a 24-hour operation that can deliver the service as one entity. So there are things I am looking at. Obviously, there are some that are outside my control, right? I don't think I can go to Chris Mutual or Don and say, let's figure out how do we do this. But there are very creative things happening in the space. I think, and so if I'm looking at the possibility, or as we look at a new employee, what else are they bringing to the table in their role? And this dual role, whether being an EMT or being a mental health counselor or addiction counselor or these other things, can help fill in that gap for us. So maybe our early steps into that space may be looking at employees that are dual role in addiction services, mental health, EMT, and other things. So I think that's capacity that we've been intentional about building in our team. All of our officers are trained in crisis intervention, dementia, and first aid, and being able to recognize those, provide mental health first aid. So we're already thinking about that space and doing training. What is the next step in that role? And so I'll continue to explore that, because I have a duty to provide the best service that we can for citizens. And if upskilling and retooling our employees into that space is necessary, then we certainly have to consider and do some work towards it. I don't know if that's satisfactory.
I love those ideas, Josue, and I'm of course eager to continue to think about that with you. But what portion of the public safety budget is dispatch?
88%. Matt, am I right on that? 88% is staff?
No, dispatch.
Oh, dispatch. Oh, I'm sorry. Dispatch is it's a little over $50,000 operation, and that's the 3 full-time staff, for 3 full-time dispatchers that we have, plus 2 regular part-time dispatchers, and we carry 2 to 3 as needed dispatchers to fill in any shifts that are down. So.
And what portion of 911 calls go to our local dispatch? And how does that change the quality of service?
So every call that is a police call gets routed back to dispatch, to our local dispatch. So if you call 911, your first point of entry would likely be our 911 call center out of Xenia. So the first
Xenia.
question that asks is this a medical or fire or police emergency? And based on that response, now they'll depending on the type of call that it is, if it's they have their own criteria and we can provide that. It sends it over to our dispatch or local dispatch. If it's a call where say that say like someone needs assistance, a welfare check, those calls will be directed to our local dispatch, and our dispatch they have their protocols to follow and they respond to the call. A lot of our I can get the call volume, call types. Does the call initiate out of 911 or is it initiated directly into our 7206 number? So we can break that down for you, but I don't have that in front of me. And I think that may give
I don't need to know.
Yeah, that may give you an idea of
Is there like a tree? Is there a routing tree that shows how those calls flow?
Yes, there is. There are procedures, protocols, and procedures that the dispatch follow based on the type of call that it is. So yes, we do have that, and both our operations have those protocols, and the Xenia 911 have protocols.
Do we need a subcommittee with council participation to look into some of these elements of the public safety budget, including dispatch? Council members?
What is it that you want to solve? I think
I'd like to respond to that because I was looking at it a bit differently in terms of the new chief with a request that we hire someone who is going to come in knowing that we want to have a much deeper dive into our police department in terms of how it is staffed, who the people are that are being staffed, dispatch, all of the kind of questions that we're asking. So that would be it's sort of a different take from Lisa's question, but I think that we have to have some kind of structure to reevaluate because I think that although it's hard to tell because we don't have this information, I think that 1/3 of our full-time equivalent approximately are with the police department, but we don't have that information. And I didn't find the information that was given about staffing. I couldn't understand it. So, I mean, I can understand if there are 2 officers on duty going around, but does that mean the chief is in there and the sergeant's in there and the dispatch is in there? So that means there are 5 people altogether. But at any rate, yes, I think that whether it's a task force or however, I think we do need to have more study given our budget, given the size of our community, given the fact that we really have a pretty safe community on the whole.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Marianne. I mean, and Josue, to your point, like what problem am I trying to solve? I don't know. I mean, I don't feel adequately informed. And so that's, I think we should be. So I really am just asking questions, and I like to look at decision trees and things like that. And so I'm not sure all 5 council persons really have the appetite to really become extremely familiar. And with a new chief coming in, like, for example, if we ask a certain interview question or when that person gets started, I want to feel as though I'm adequately informed to ask him or her good questions as well, and to be certain that that person is acting in the way that we would want that person to act, because we have that responsibility. So I'm not trying to solve a problem per se, but as Mary Ann said, to really be certain that we have a deep, deep understanding of this budget
Mhm.
and the workflow. That's all.
Sure. And while you were answering that question, I did a quick calculation. It looks, I estimate dispatch will cost about $250,000 this year. And this is about 30% of the total public safety budget.
This is Laura, and I've kind of been listening with interest. So Lisa, I love your question, and I've been advocating for council committees for a long time. And if we had a public safety council committee, we wouldn't need to form a committee because they would have a deep expertise in these questions. And it would be a ready-made way to ask other questions. I'm sensing in the public sphere a desire to really look hard at our policing budget and the cost of government in general. I think this goes to the overall affordability of Yellow Springs. Can we live within the budget we have? Can we redirect to services that people want? I know our employees do as much as they can to provide the service we ask them to provide, but I'm starting to hear and feel that the people want different services, especially with regard to policing. So I think it's worth, thinking anew, thinking fresh, thinking outside the box, and rethinking how we provide public safety. I guess I'll make one other comment along with that. I don't feel an appetite on behalf of citizens for us to have additional levies, including reciprocal tax. I mean, I've definitely felt it was wise for us not to advocate for that when essentially the schools are going for another 0.5%. And I think people are reacting about the cost of this latest school levy. And I hate to say it, I would almost love to find a way for the village to reduce what we spend to make room in everyone's budget to get the school services we need. Looking at it as an overall tax burden put on the citizens from Miami Township, from the village, from the school district. I would love to be able to tell people you can vote for new schools and your overall tax bill is not going to be much different. That would be amazing, but that would mean us really rethinking local government.
I would add to that, Laura, it's rethinking local government and all the municipal services. There's been an effort to have a conversation around all the taxes that our residents pay and what are they paying for. I think there's at times a lack of clarity of where the property taxes and the income taxes go. We get less than 14% of the property taxes, and we get 1.5% in income tax. And where does that, how does that fit into the overall tax burden of our citizens? I mean, our residents are all informed about that overall tax burden. And utilities is part of that conversation as well. One of the things that we strive for is to run our enterprises without any additional increases. And you've seen that. You saw that for 2021. You're seeing this in this budget that we're not proposing any rate increases to electric, water, or sewer. And we're absorbing the inflationary effect. Chemical cost goes up, wages go up. So we're creating efficiencies to be able to absorb that increased cost.
I really like your idea about rethinking maybe public safety because, again, of course, it would take several million joint meetings with the Miami Township, but the model that I believe Oakwood follows is every person is a firefighter and a police officer. And they make much more efficient use of staff that way. Because of course, when you're a firefighter, and I used to be an EMT, so I know from whence I speak, is you have a lot of downtime. And what would that look like to combine those efforts? And the other thing, Miami Township, this is also true. Miami Township relies a lot on volunteers. And I can tell you the trend has been towards professionalization, just because the demands and the level of service people expect now from EMTs, it's hard to maintain it as a volunteer.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I think it's worth pursuing.
And compliance requirement, I think that's the things that are contributed to a more professional staff. Now, I'll remind you, I'm also I was an EMT and firefighter, and at Miami Township. So I was both certified. I was certified in those roles, so I know the work well. I want to stress that I responded to Lisa's question about innovation and what's happening in that space. And so I'm doing my work to see what's happening in this space and how municipalities or size are creating or innovating. And so obviously any work towards that kind of model or structured, there'll be 1,000 meetings, as you said, Laura, to get there.
So I guess I want to just also add that, clearly what we don't want to get lost in the shuffle is that rethinking and innovating is happening.
Right.
We're looking at a decrease in the budget of 7% from what we saw last time. And also if you compare to prior years, even though costs are increasing. So I definitely support more rethinking and innovating, but I don't want the work that is being done to be lost in sort of, this discussion.
Maybe some of that could shift into what's being discussed with goals, just because I think it's a major, it's like turning a barge, because you're also looking at having to increase training budget. You're looking at what do you do now with the CRB if in fact we're doing any kind of staff cuts and bringing in county folks, and how do we train people who are township employees, and holy smoke, it's a lot. So maybe that becomes part of the goals discussion as to whether that's the kind of big shift that you want to be looking at.
That's an excellent point, Judy. I think I certainly could bring that to our next goal session, or we can have it then. I think that is a topic or an endeavor that takes years. It takes years to figure out the legal frameworks, the management structure, entities who have combined departments. That's not something that's done from one fiscal year to the next. It takes a lot of planning. And we don't know how Chris or Don may feel about this.
It's actually great timing for Lisa mentioned the, wanting to finally bring participatory budgeting into the picture. And, this is a decision that's going to certainly impact citizens and impact, what kind of services they're getting in that regard. So it might kind of be a good place to start that conversation. I don't know. Might be bad, might be good.
That's an excellent point, especially with when we're thinking about the overall tax burden, right? Where does our citizens' money go? What are they paying for? It's our government services, it's the school, it's the township, and the township fire and EMS services. So I think it could also be part of that overall tax burden conversation.
Yeah, I agree with that, Judy and Josue and Lisa and everyone else who cares or thinks about participatory budgeting. I think, yeah, it's something that folks already have some ideas about, or you can see it. You know, I flush my toilet and I don't even think about where it goes, you know, but in terms of police and safety and fire, you know, those things are more relevant on a day-to-day basis. Flushing toilets relevant too. I just don't care where it goes. But I think that's whether that's the right thing or not. I think that's the category of type of things. You know, not just some back alley or back office type service. You know, but something that's really public facing. And whether it's again this particular issue or some other related project, I think is a good way to move forward in our consideration of a participatory budgeting process.
Hey, Kevin,
Yes, sir.
if it don't go down your COLA, you'll be concerned.
Well,
What I was gonna say, Kevin, is, you know, I'll take the you not caring or having to worry about that as a vote of confidence. We're taking care of the basics.
that's right. Not being concerned. I trust that everything's working as it should. And thank you for your support.
Are you comfortable with this level of a deeper dive that we've done on the public safety? And I'm primarily looking at you, Lisa, since you bring in the tough questions on this.
Yeah, I would like to see some of the detail that we mentioned.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
Thank you. And I also heard that Mary Ann wanted a little bit more clarity just on FTE ratios, personnel ratios in different areas.
And I raised a question the last time we met about this. I asked a question about your current projections for personnel costs for the YSPD for public safety. And I know at that time Matt, you said you had not considered any additional compensation costs for the new chief. I know it may still be too soon for that, but just my question now would be, are you comfortable moving forward and feeling that we could address whatever the needs are when the time approaches?
I'll answer that. I'll take that, Matt. Kevin, the answer is yes. We expect to have some savings and some of the personnel changes that have happened. And so we also are anticipating being able to backfill that chief position with the current financial allocation set aside for that. But obviously, if there's a top talent that we think is within our reach, we will consider any adjustments as well. But until we know more, until we have a candidate before us and are in negotiations, I won't know information on that.
Good, excellent, thank you.
Okay, do you want to take the next 30 minutes, talk about revenue projections? Laura touched a bit on this already, but we've got that reciprocal tax that we've been talking about. I presented a list, or I highlighted a list of opportunities: street levy, parks levy, adjusting planning and zoning fees, stormwater management fees. The other one is this one. It's more of a cost shifting opportunity. I think many years ago there was a commitment made that from council that the administration of the government will do all the sidewalk repairs and then turn over the sidewalks to the property owners, the homeowners. I want to look at a model for 2022 where we expedite the repairs that are left, get those completed in 2022, and we can turn those sidewalks over to the property owners. So that's also a way that instead of dragging out all these sidewalk repairs, because I think almost every council meeting you're hearing about sidewalk encroachment, sidewalk obstructions, unleveled areas. We could be aggressive about making those repairs, allocating more money to it, and then handing that over to the property owners. So those are six revenue opportunities that we could explore.
Let's wait. And Brian, I know you've also expressed concern about paid parking. And certainly when I think about paid parking, it's in my vision of whatever we do, however we do it, it would not, residents would not incur any cost for parking. You know, I don't know if we get a hanger on our mirrors or a sticker on our windshield or something, you know, so, you know, so there's been a lot of conversation about parking, whether we need it, et cetera, you know, but similar to an argument that was made for the jail, where, you know, the argument is that, well, the tourists, the folks who come in from outside the county are going to pay the brunt of that cost through sales tax. You know, similarly, we could talk about paid parking where residents don't have to pay, but it's just all the visitors that come in that have to pay. Where are we with that with regard to a potential source of revenue? And is that a big ticket item with regard to setting up, you know, the structure for accepting funds?
I'm able to jump in, Brian, if you want me to. All those things could be addressed through a digital platform, Kevin. So you talk about a couple tangible things. One is there a way to distinguish with downtown parkers? And let's just focus on downtown, the downtown parking area where there's a 2-hour parking limit. Is there a way to minimize the impact on our residents and shift it over on visitors? Yes, there is. You mentioned the sticker option. The sticker option could be a way that those with the stickers either never get a ticket, so they can park there 24 hours, and oftentimes, you know, you see them multiple days. Would they be exempt from any parking enforcement? Exemptions could be made. So the short answer to that is yes. I think stepping back a little bit, we have to think about or craft what is the vision for parking? What is it that we are trying to accomplish? Who is it meant to serve? I think there are peaks. There are peaks in the various business cycles that are in the village. There are peaks where parking is a challenge. How do we strategize around those peaks is important. So setting the vision for what our parking strategy would be, and the parking strategy has to be a multi-pronged approach, because not all the businesses in the downtown or in the area are the same type of business. So you're going to have those quick run folks that are just, you know, they're coming in for, you know, an hour, 30 minutes to an hour to get something, and they're on their way. Where do we incentivize those folks versus those that are driving in from somewhere? They're parking in the downtown of John Bryan to get on the bike path. How do we incentivize? What's the strategy for that customer base? And how do we direct them to a parking asset that fits that customer profile? So coming up with a vision and identifying multiple strategies to serve the different parking pressure points that we're getting is important. For the downtown, I think that most of us would agree that that's premium parking, that we want that to be turnover, right? Like, I don't think it's not meant to be 24-hour parking. So how do we incentivize that? A digital platform such as the Park Mobile presentation that we included in your almost 500-page packet a few weeks ago allows for that digital management of those parking. So a scenario that the Park Mobile representative presented to me is, if you've got a kiosk and you got the phone app, anyone could go down there, they get a ticket for 2 hours. It's free. That first ticket for 2 hours doesn't cost them anything on their app or on the kiosk. Anytime after that, then they're subject to parking enforcement regulations. So you could automatically have a ticket via some digital system, or you send a parking attendant to ticket the system. So the platform can give you that 2 free hour ticket if that's the rule that you want to follow, or another period of time. So a digital platform can provide a lot more opportunities for parking management than your traditional meter parking or gated parking. So the vision, getting to that parking vision, is key. And I know that this is a topic that will probably come up in a future council meeting. So I'm gonna get to working on that to make the present those options, because I think we didn't have an opportunity to really do a deeper dive on the paid parking options or parking options overall. The last package, what it was intended to cover are what are parking challenges or what are the parking opportunities, and it was all just put in a packet as information sharing, and it's meant to be background so that we come into the conversation informed about what opportunities and challenges we're facing. Brian, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I mean, I'll just add that we talked about this at agenda planning this morning, and so I've committed to working on a first draft of just that multi-layered kind of vision that that Josue is referring to. I think my interpretation of what Planning Commission did is not really tackle or do the deeper dive, which is fine. But I think we need to do that. And so I think part of that is just kind of figuring out, there are plenty of places for people to park for free. There's plenty of existing assets and just what's going to benefit folks overall. And I think there's a lot of misinformation or just people don't really understand how it works all together. And I think it's important for us to bring that information forward. And I see Mary Ann's had her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Well, in regard to parking, I know Brian, it seems like forever, has been suggesting paid parking, and I've always resisted, but I'm now more at the turning point thinking about that. I imagine if we had it, then people would start parking in the neighborhoods more. But I think we have enough parking. I think we need more signage for where parking is available. But I'm willing to consider the paid parking idea, especially since it seems easier to do than it might have been in the past. Regarding sidewalks, I'm not ready to think about turning sidewalks over to citizens. If we think of sidewalks as part of our transportation system, then I think the village has a responsibility. On the other hand, I do think that people who have sidewalks need to maintain the sidewalks. And I think a lot of the problem with the sidewalks is people letting their weeds and vegetation hang over the sidewalks. They're letting grass and stuff get into the sidewalks so that the sidewalks are becoming narrower. And that should be the homeowner's responsibility. And, we don't have a lot of personnel at the village level to get people to do the right thing. And a lot of times people don't. They may not walk, so they're not paying attention, but some kind of effort to have people get their sidewalks in shape. And I think that's probably the biggest thing at this point, as opposed to sidewalks that really need to be replaced. That's my 2 cents in this.
Well, personally, on the sidewalk repair thing, for a couple of years, I would say things about my sidewalks, and then I submitted a iWorks request, and like overnight, my skateboard ramps were gone. I got some sweet gum trees in front of my yard in the village right away, that really were harmful to my sidewalks. But I would submit that if I'm responsible going forward, I'm okay with that, because those trees are full grown now. Like, they're not going to grow anymore, and they're not going to disrupt my sidewalk anymore. So I don't anticipate having a problem. So I'm okay with taking responsibility for it on that one. But then just one more thing, and then I'll step away regarding the parking. might be, paid parking, a paid parking proposal might be another opportunity, for, a participatory budget type presentation. Again, the kind of thing that folks can get animated about. I mean, there's a lot of fervor one way or the other about it. Everybody that ever comes downtown, unless they're always walking or always biking, is going to have a parking issue at some point or another, so everybody's got some skin in the game. So again, that's just another opportunity, I think, to something else to consider as a possible participatory budgeting project. That is all.
Okay, what else?
I was waiting. Should that one roll into goals? Sidewalks is a huge, huge, huge issue. Council spent a lot of time and money on it a number of years ago. Trying to figure it out, trying to work numbers, all the aspects of it. It's an extensive issue. So maybe that should pop over to goals as well.
It's a good idea. Johnny, you waving your hands?
I don't know, is Johnny having
Yeah.
cramps or is he raising his hand?
No, I'm raising my hand because this is particular to me. We have to understand that normally when we did stuff like COVID money and stuff like that, we cut sidewalks out of, it's normally the first thing cut. We also did not start on them when Village did, so I still got a phase of grinding and then we still got repairs to do. So I eventually say that we should give them back to the villagers, but I think Josue is correct. Once we get it done, we need to pass the cost back over to the homeowners like Kevin. When he submitted it, we was able to get his sidewalks done. And now Kevin should be responsible after we received them in bad condition, we improved them. Now we're giving them back to the villagers. And we should be able to do that with any place that we've already got done. If not, we need to add more money to the budget to be able to maintain them and do repairs every year.
Well, personally, I do want to reiterate what Judy said. For those of us that have been around for a while, there was a lot of discussion about this and a lot of controversy. And I'm not ready to do it in 2022, but I appreciate that it's something that we're thinking about. So.
But what I think I heard Johnny say is that given the sidewalk work that's hanging out there, it wasn't done in 2021, there may not be enough budget for that in 2022 to catch up with that work. And that some things like that, we should be very clear, shouldn't be cut again and again. I think that's what I heard Johnny say, more politely than what I just said.
So Johnny, the people that, or the contracting company that we had that did the grinding, and they had lots of parameters in terms of angles and something that could be repaired via grinding, and then everything else had to be replaced. Are they done with their work throughout? But have they been paid for work that they're still doing? I guess it's
No, we've not had them back since 21. We had to cancel that part of it to be able to get the money correct for the budget. So we have canceled in the last 2 years. So we need to get them back on schedule to get the grinding. They've only been paid for what they've done, and we've postponed them for 2 years now. So we're hoping to get it started back up in 22, but again, we're 2 years behind.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that we haven't done any sidewalk.
No, you're correct. We have done, we've not done no grinding.
Sidewalk replacements.
So what would be if we were to include it in 2022? I'm not suggesting that we, but what seemed to me in the past, we were devoting $50,000 a year to sidewalks. That's not in this budget. That's correct?
No, there's sidewalk repair money in this budget.
Oh, there is. But not for grinding.
Well, what we were suggesting is an expedited service to take care of all the remaining grinding work on the sidewalks for 2022, and then hand that over to the residents, so that 2023 and onward, we would dedicate funding for other opportunities. I think we were trying to expedite the sidewalk repair so that we don't drag it over years. Now, I understood that the plan was to do all the sidewalk repairs and then hand them over to the property owners.
Yeah, I don't believe it was ever discussed that way. So the last time we discussed who was responsible for the sidewalks, the decision was the village.
And they would be in perpetuity.
Yep. And I'm not saying, I'm not
Okay.
suggesting that was my opinion on it, but the majority opinion was the village was going to maintain responsibility.
Okay, then that is something I have been misinformed about.
You
Yeah.
and me both.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a unfunded mandate because the dollar amount was put before council and council sort of went "Wah, wah, wah," at the time and said, yes, we're going to maintain those sidewalks, but it was never budgeted for in inadequate amounts. That's just never happened.
Mhm. And that's particularly important to point out because we have a streets enterprise that is heavily funded by the general fund. There aren't dedicated revenue streams for streets improvements. And that's one of the reasons we put up that, or I suggested considering a streets levy, because it's common for communities to have street levies to fund roads and sidewalk and other infrastructure repairs of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to at some point revisiting that policy, because when we talked about it, we talked about, incentive programs. There's a one that we looked at that Austin had where, by having the property owners be responsible, we could help them with those repairs and put that together. There were plenty of people, citizens, that said that they would accept that responsibility. But again, plenty that did not like it. But definitely the way it's been left, by the prior council, I guess, was that the village was responsible. But again, we had no way to figure out how to properly pay for it. So I guess what I'm getting at is I think we're going to have a lot to do in 2022. So revisiting that policy in 2022, I would take a lot of time from my experience. But anyway, but at least we have clarity on what has been established from the past discussion.
So I think we have about 10 minutes or so. I don't know. Is there anything else that anyone is planning on discussing or needs to discuss before we wrap up?
We cover all of our items. We cover our cost reduction measures. We cover the changes. We follow up on the task. We provided the revenue suggestions. We want to make sure that we get all your questions and requests for information down so that for the next meeting, we're able to provide those for you. So takeaway for now is we've got a question about decision trees and how calls are processed through the system. What percentage of those calls are coming directly to dispatch versus the 911 system? More ratios on personnel, particularly dispatch service as a ratio or component of the overall public safety work and FTE breakdown. So we'll do it for dispatch, police officers, and other function areas. Are there any other requests that we should put on our task list for you?
Yes, my question in regard to the police department was, I wanted to understand how many people are actually on duty in the police department at any given time and what their role is and the days. And I wasn't able to understand that from the information in the packet.
Okay, I would take a sample week, if you will, and outline the sort of an hourly agenda, who's in what function and name and job category. So okay. You'll see similar to the breakdown as a weekly schedule, that one of the templates that was included in the packet, I would include a column for what's dispatch, what is chief hours, sergeants, community outreach, property management, and any other relevant position.
Thank you.
Would that work for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So I just want to highlight two things. One is, just flagging that, on the agenda for our November 1st meeting is to give an update since we've had 2 budget sessions. So we'll talk briefly about, what we've been talking about in these sessions. And then the second thing I wanted to emphasize about on the revenue side, Josue, is, again, whatever we need to put in place to capture any income tax that is not being captured right now. And I remember you saying that might require our street vendors to register in some kind of way so that Rita can make sure that they're paying their income tax. I don't know if there's some kind of infrastructure that needs to be put into place for independent contractors. And I understand that, some people can still, underreport or not report. But I don't want to forget that there is this, I think, amount of income tax that is currently not being collected. And I want to make sure whatever policies are in place to do that, or at least that we talk about them and council decides on that.
Correct. I will write something up on that. And we're talking about the vendors that are exempt from registering or getting a permit from us. And so the question came about asking Rita what is the income effect of those, and well, we don't know who they are because they're not registered. So okay.
And Josue, could you let us know what the sale of Rex resulted in? I understand that the Rex were sold for this year.
Yes, I will issue a report for that.
And that goes right into the electric enterprise fund, is that right?
Yes, correct. So it does go to the electric fund, and if you know, for the 2021, the proceeds of those sales were already committed, with 28,000 going for covering the sustainability plan, and the other funds going for as a match commitment for the power plant demolition. I met with Nick last week, or this week, and talk about what's the timeline. And so they're expecting their grant agreement to come through in November. So they may start their work as soon as December, and that would put the demolition of the power plant into the Q1, Q2, or at least the planning phases of demolition within Q1 and Q2. So we're going to go ahead and budget that match commitment in our 2022 budget.
Okay. Any final questions, comments? All right. Here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Josue and Matt and Johnny for all this work, and for your teams that went behind it, and for answering all our questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, here.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn
I
I
move.
move.
and a second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Yeah.
Okay. Have great weekends. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.